Hello everybody. My name is Jay. We are basically Khyaathi Cloud Technologies. So we provide various courses like Python, Django, AWS, Flask. Apart from that, we even have DevOps, Android, OpenStack, so stuff like that. We also deliver corporate trainings and also online sessions. Yeah. So let's get started with AWS. So So here is what it is. If you guys can see my screen, we're gonna deal with topics like what is AWS, uh, what is cloud computing, what are the various cloud characteristics, different type of service models in public cloud, that is what is IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS, and what are the various differences between these three service models. Apart from that, we're going to see what are the IaaS services in AWS, what are the PaaS services in AWS, what is a region, what is an availability zone. Then we're going to try and log into our AWS console and see just to get a look and feel of the resources present over there, along with some QA session and prerequisites for this course. Yeah. So, okay, what is AWS? So in 2006, so people say that cloud started in 2010, but it has basically started way back in 2006. Um, AWS or Amazon Web Services kind of began offering IT infrastructure services to various businesses across the globe on the web, right? So if someone is asking you to define what is cloud computing, in a layman term, cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT resources and applications via the internet with a pay-as-you-go pricing. Yeah. So now consider an example wherein you work for a consulting firm, right? So suppose and which involves a lot of travel. Yeah. So suppose there's a project that's in Hyderabad, you come over here, and if it's a one year or a 2 year long project, what would you do? Would you prefer buying a house over here, or would you prefer getting into a rented accommodation, right? So obviously you would prefer a rented accommodation. So the same concept is now into various businesses across the web. So we call it as cloud. So instead of purchasing server, instead of purchasing hardware, instead of having a network administrator, instead of having resources to kind of build the entire application, customers have slowly moved towards cloud, wherein they contact service providers like AWS, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, and then they kind of get their servers for rent from these service providers. Yeah. So this is so this is about cloud computing. Now let us quickly go through some of the characteristics of cloud. Okay. So the first thing is scalability, elasticity. Then we have self-service, and then we have something called as costing, that is pay as you go. Yeah. So these are some of the characteristics of your cloud. So now what is scalability? Suppose you own a e-commerce website like Amazon or Flipkart, or for that matter any e-commerce website. Yeah. So since you are the owner of the business, for every festive offers, you would put there a big coding on your website which says the Great Indian Sale, right? So over there, whenever there's a cycle of a demand which goes on, you need your server or your system to scale up to the level of the demand which is being requested, right? Suppose you have two servers in your deployment, okay, which can handle around 50 users. Now during the sale period, you would basically notice a huge spike in the sale, right? So there would be tons and thousands of users who would try to log into your site and they try to purchase the products over there, correct? So scalability is a concept wherein your system should basically go ahead and add those additional servers which would kind of meet the demand, right? So that is your scalability. Now on cloud this is very easy because AWS at least gives you an option of scaling your entire deployment model uh, according to the need and according to the demand, right? Suppose if you're on premise, then you have two servers which would handle 50 users. There should be some sort of an IT department manager guy who would kind of anticipate the demand, and then he would basically raise a request to add 10 more servers, correct? So now putting a request is one thing and getting it approved is another thing. Now if this IT guy or this IT department manager requests for 10 more additional servers, then that would preliminary involve some sort of a cost, and then it would also involve some sort of a maintenance. Purchasing the server is one thing, and then maintaining it is altogether a different ballgame. So there, when we talk about cost, right? So there are a couple of things over here. One is your purchase cost, and then you have your setup cost, and then you have your maintenance cost. Correct? So basically, purchasing the server, then going ahead and setting up your entire OS runtime along with the applications and data on it, and then once the setup is done, you're gonna sit and maintain the servers, right? It's an additional overhead onto the IT department of any organization, right? So for this reason, what basically customers are trying to do is they have slowly or gradually started moving towards cloud. So on cloud, if you are using the server for 1 hour, you just have to pay it for only for that 1 hour, right? And then starting October 2017, AWS basically started the pricing per second. So instead of hourly basis, now it is on second basis, right? So that is scalability. Now, the next most important thing is elasticity. Now, what is elasticity? So now let's talk about the same scenario. You have a spike in your sale. You are adding 10 servers, which would basically meet the demand. Now, once that sale gets over, you no longer need those 10 servers, right? You have to remove those 10 servers from your deployment footprint. So now, deprovisioning or removing, again, then adding up those 10 servers whenever there is a demand, this entire cycle is called elasticity. Yeah. So elasticity is very important. The next thing is again self-service. So now if you are the customer and if you go to AWS and then tell them that okay, I need two instances which are memory optimized and three instances. When I say instance, it's an EC2 instance. We'll talk about it in a while. And I need three instances which are CPU optimized, stuff like that. AWS would come up with a solution. They'll basically give the customer all the resources, like we call it as compute. Compute is nothing but memory plus CPU. Yeah. So AWS would basically give you the resources, and it is up to you on how you want to build the system, right? So they'll give you an access to entire AWS console along with whatever X amount of GB memory which you have requested and N amount of cores of CPU. Right now, it is up to you on how you're gonna deploy those your application into AWS, right? So what I meant by self-service here basically is you can build your services, you have the entire control, you can even add users, make sure those users are provisioned to the resources, so everything is in your control. So we classify it as two types: one is system and one is instance level. So anything on the system level is taken care by AWS, and anything on the instance level is taken care by the customer, or for that matter, whoever is approaching AWS to deploy their applications onto cloud. Yeah. So this gives you a flexibility of basically what you wanted to do with your resources, which is limited when you talk about an on-premise environment. Yeah. And the next and the most important thing is costing. Like as already said, costing varies from region to region. A region is nothing but a geographical area. We call it as region in AWS terminology. So, sorry, guys. So, suppose if you are kind of requesting 2 GB memory and 2 cores. So, if this is the compute which you want and you want to use only for 3 hours, there are basically various pricing models. You can basically pick up a spot instance. You can basically pick up a on demand instance. We'll talk about it in very soon, very shortly. So costing is one additional benefit which the customers get. You don't have to pay you would rather pay only for the amount of time which you have used the server. Okay, so that is costing. That is all about costing. So these are the characteristics of cloud, the whole and sole reason why customers are moving towards cloud. Okay, so next thing which we're going to talk about is what are the various types of service models in public cloud. And before we go there, we're going to talk about the various types in the cloud. One is your public cloud, the next one is your private cloud, and then you have something called as a hybrid cloud. Yeah. So what is public cloud? So any service which you can basically access via internet is called public cloud, and any service or business which you basically access in an intranet is called your private cloud. Now a combination of these two, we call it as a hybrid cloud. So we'll discuss about why we need a hybrid cloud, why are customers preferring a hybrid cloud in the next sessions. Okay, so we'll park this hybrid cloud aside for a while. Now over here we're going to talk about public cloud. Yeah. So for every there are basically 3 service models of public cloud. Yeah, one is your infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and then you have something called as software as a service, right? So let us basically understand the difference between these 3 service models of public cloud. Okay, I'm going to quickly hop onto a diagram which I've borrowed from the internet, and I think this really helps understand the entire the difference between on-premise and public cloud. If it is public cloud, what is the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS? Okay, so instead of talking about the service models, let's talk about the different layers which are present over here. Now, considering it that if you're to start a new business, right? What is it which you need? First thing first, you need servers, then you need storage, yeah, and then you also need some kind of a networking mechanism in place along with virtualization. So you purchase a big huge server box which might have around 150 GB of RAM, 90 cores, and then you slice it using virtualization. You create different VMs. You basically try and install a hypervisor on top of it, and hypervisor would basically do that slicing of each box. And on each VM, you kind of deploy your applications, right? So okay, so now if you look at the package software section over here, to do networking you need a network guy, yeah, and then you also need a storage administrator. Along with that, you also need a system admin guy who would slice your servers, and then who would basically try and install your middleware and OS on top of it. Then you would have a software installation team which would basically install your software along with all the applications on top of it. So if you are managing all these things in-house, the first and foremost thing which is very important, which basically you might want to look at, is cost. Cost is how the businesses operate. So if you are managing all these things in-house, that is on premise, you have to again rely on these 3 things, which is purchase cost, setup cost, and maintenance cost, which is very high, and customers wouldn't really want to bear this additional cost uh, when they get everything with a high feasibility on cloud. Yeah. So on infrastructure as a service, the networking layer, the storage layer, the server layer, and virtualization layer. So bottom four are basically managed by the vendor. So when I say vendor, it can be AWS, it can be Microsoft Azure, Google, or Oracle. Um, for that matter, any other service, cloud service provider. Okay, so sorry guys. So these four things basically which are being highlighted, the bottom four are something which are maintained by the vendor in an infrastructure as a service. Now, what is it which you're going to maintain? So once you have these four things in place, that is compute plus network in place, the next thing which you're going to try and do is go ahead and install your OS. It can be Windows, it can be any variant of Linux, Ubuntu or Debian or any OS for that matter. Then you would go ahead and kind of install the middleware plus runtime. So now when we say middleware and runtime, these two terms are kind of interrelated. So if I have to define these two terms, it is basically a layer which would allow your applications and data to communicate with your virtualization, OS, server, storage, etc. Okay, so just to give you an example, a middleware can be a ODBC connection or a TCP connection. A runtime can always be your .NET or a Java application. Yeah, so once you get the compute and memory, the compute and network in place, as a consumer, you have to kind of install the OS, install the application, then dump your data onto it, and then release it for the users to use. So this is infrastructure as a service. Now let's talk about PaaS. PaaS is again platform as a service. Underneath this, except your applications and data, rest all things are taken care by the vendor. So if you're going to, for say, Oracle, and if you're saying that, look, I want my EBS as an application, as a PaaS service to me, what Oracle would do is it would basically um, go ahead and take care of the virtualization, server, storage. It will also install the operating system for you along with the application installations, and then you're gonna go ahead and create your application. You have to maintain your data. So as a consumer on a PaaS service, all you have to do is you have to take care of your applications and data. The rest all things are managed by the vendor. Yeah. So now the next and the last thing is software as a service. This again is an interesting thing. Over here, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is you have to pay for each user. It would be a user-based subscription. To give you an example, Oracle has recently released Oracle Database as a Service, right? And there are many other applications which kind of are given as a SaaS model. So as a consumer, all you will have is one single link. Say for example, if it is a SaaS model, yeah, so it will be something like XYZ oracle.com/ebso. This is just an example. Okay, so as a consumer, all you'll have is you'll be given one link along with the user ID and the credentials. So all you have to do is log in and start using the application. There's nothing which is on your head. All you have to do is take the application link, start doing your work onto it, start using the product. So that is a SaaS-based model. So out of these three, it basically depends on what the customer is looking for. So if you're a solution architect and if you really want to kind of recommend whether the customer should go for IaaS or PaaS or SaaS, I'll let you know all those things in future sessions, because that's an interesting topic on how do you want to convince the customer to go for IaaS, how do you want to convince the customer to pick up a PaaS or a SaaS model, SaaS-based model. So if there is no SaaS, then I would really recommend to have customer use the infrastructure as a service for all practical reasons. If your application has a lot of integrations, then this is one which you really wanted to look forward for. Okay, so this is a general difference between what is IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Yeah. So now, what are my AWS services? So in AWS we call something as compute, and whenever we say compute, it will be an EC2 instance. Compute again is just a combination of X amount of memory plus Y amount of CPU cores. Okay, so EC2 falls under IaaS services which have been given by AWS. Yeah, then you have something called as S3, which is related to your storage. Then you have something called Glacier, again related to storage. Then you have something called EBS, elastic block storage, and then you have EFS, which we call it as elastic file system. Yeah, so and then you have something called as VPC, which is related to your network. So these are the three services which Amazon basically offers the consumer as part of their IaaS offerings. Okay, now what are the PaaS resources which AWS offers? So underneath PaaS, the first thing would be your IAM, which is related to security. Then you have something called as CloudWatch, which is related to your monitoring. Yeah, and then you have something called as SNS. So this is your simple notification service. Then you have something called as RDS, which is again related to database. Then you have something called as ELB, elastic load balancers, and then auto scaling. Then you have something called as SSM, which is simple system manager. Basically this is used to this is basically used for automations. So suppose you have say 55,000 servers and you want to apply some kind of a patch on it, then you can use SSM to kind of roll out all the patches at a single go. Yeah, then you have something called as Route 53, which is your name resolution system. So if you want your applications to kind of communicate with the web, you need some kind of a DNS system in place, right? So you need to use Route 53 for that. Now if you also want to launch your business over the web, you have to you can basically use Route 53 over there as well. So to keep it very simple, this is something like your GoDaddy.com, wherein you can kind of go and then log into the system and then purchase some space over the internet and launch your entire website. So it has its own DNS system in place. So it's wonderful. I mean, Amazon has almost all the resources under the belt. Yeah. So these are your PaaS services. Now, why did I classify them as PaaS? Because these are the services which you can use even with your on-premise. Yeah. So now the next thing which I wanted to discuss is regions and availability zone. But before doing that, I would try and talk about the prerequisites which are required for this course. Right. So prerequisites per se, all you need is basic operating system concepts. If there are any networking concepts which you are aware of, then that would be an added advantage. Even if you don't have any networking concepts in your head, then that is fine, because I'm going to try and teach the basics of networking in this. So I would not talk about the how to create a switch on the firewall, but I would rather talk about what is a TCP/IP protocol, what is a HTTP protocol, what is an SSL layer. So some very basic concepts of networking before we get further into the course. Okay. So and if you're still not sure about what are basic OS concepts and networking concepts, even that is fine, because once we start getting into the further sessions, I can always guide you on these things. So nevertheless, doesn't matter even if you have these concepts in your head, you can still go ahead and enroll for this course. I'm going to try and help you with wherever or whatever I can. Okay, so this is one thing. Now let's quickly go into AWS console, just to get a look and feel of how does the console look like, how do I log in, what should I do before I log in, etc., etc. Okay, so go to Google and then type AWS console login page. You're gonna see something like this. Okay, so for guys who don't have an account, you would probably need to create an account. We can guide you on account creation. That's not a problem. All you need is a debit card or a credit card to create your account. And before I log in into this screen, the AWS console, one thing which I would want to discuss is on the amount of hours which we get in free tier. There's something called as a free tier service, in which you would get 750 hours of Windows EC2 instance and 750 hours of Linux instance. Okay, so this is free tier. Along with that, you also get some amount of S3. I think it is around 5 GB, and few very basic or limited access to few of the resources. Okay, so when I say 750 hours of Windows EC2 instance, that basically means if you go beyond this, you will be charged. Okay, so we'll discuss all those things in the next coming sessions. All right, so let's quickly log into the console. So this is how your console looks like, and if you go to services, you see something called as compute, developer tools, analytics, application services, storage, management, AI, and then you have business productivity, IoT, Internet of Things, security, and networking, right? So there are around odd 40 plus services over here, out of which we would definitely cover at least half of these. I think around 16 to 18 services, which we're going to cover that in this course. And I think that should be sufficient for you to prepare for an AWS Solution Architect certification. So certification per se, this course would help you to prepare for AWS Solution Architect Associate level. Okay. So this is how it looks like. Suppose if you click on EC2, you would be presented a screen wherein you get to see a lot of things on the left hand side. These are your instances. Basically in instances you have various types, which we would discuss in the coming sessions, in the future sessions. Then you have something called as AMI. I pronounce it as AMI. AMI is nothing but AWS VM. Basically it's a machine image. Okay, then you have something called as elastic block storage, network and security. You have security groups which would restrict the access, which would control the access of incoming and outgoing requests into your instance. Yeah, so these are few services which I would really want to talk about. So just for the sake of creating an instance, just to give you a brief idea of how we create an instance, you want to create on launch instance. Here you see various AMIs over here. We call this as an AWS marketplace. So wherever you see free tier eligible, right? So you're gonna pick that and then you're gonna select it. Move ahead with your AWS instance creation. Okay. So we will see this in your future sessions. So one more important thing. So when you log in, you get to see something called as a region on the right hand side, right? So you see something called as North Virginia, Ohio, California, Oregon, and in Asia Pacific we have Mumbai. Okay, so now these regions are nothing but the geographical locations where you have your AWS data centers residing. Okay, so now which one to pick? I usually prefer North Virginia because of the pricing. So the way it works is, there are two things. One, suppose if you're designing a solution for a customer who's in US, so what you need to look at basically is how close is he to these geographical areas. Suppose if the customer is in Ohio, go ahead and select Ohio. If he's in North Virginia, go ahead and select North Virginia, right? So it depends on where the customer user base is decided. Yeah. So we talk something about latency. So latency, you go over here. Yeah. If you say ping google.com, you get to see the time which says 18 milliseconds. At the same time, if you say ping yahoo.com, it says 224 milliseconds. Now, what you need to understand over here is when you say or when you initiate a request for google.com, you get the page within 18 milliseconds. At the same time, when you say yahoo.com, you get to see within 224 milliseconds, right? So 224 is on a higher scale, but as an end user you might not notice it, but when you run a long running process, definitely there would be a lag. So it is always good to launch your instances in the location which is very near to the customer. Now, why did I pick North Virginia when I'm sitting in India? It is only because of the costing. So let's quickly go and see the pricing segregated by the region. So now if we say Asia Pacific Mumbai, for a small T2 nano instance, this is the costing which you get, right? Now if you go and see Oregon, for a small T2 nano instance, you get to see the costing as $0.0058 per hour. Now if you go and look at North Virginia, though the costing is 0.0058, but out of my experience, North Virginia region is something which is kind of low on the cost. Okay, that's the reason why we pick North Virginia. That doesn't mean that everyone should use that. You can still go ahead and use Mumbai or Oregon, or for that matter any region which you would really want to play around with. Yeah, so this is one reason why how we should pick up the region. You have to make sure you take a look at the latency. So the thumb rule is always pick the region which is very close to the customer. Okay, so so these are the things which I wanted to discuss, guys. Now let's talk about the course. How are we going to go ahead with this course? So classes, first of all, it's a 35 hours course with the addition of 3 hours or a subtraction of 3 hours depending on the schedule. Okay, and then the classes are online and also classroom. Okay, then after each topic we're gonna have a lab session. So for example, if you look at the syllabus, right? So suppose if we are talking about EC2, suppose if we complete these 4 topics over here, we're gonna have a very short lab session. I'll help you guys. I'll try and give you some basic exercises and then help you perform this lab. I'll make you basically log into the Amazon console and then try and create an EC2 instance over there. So we're gonna have a very short lab session every day. Okay, and apart from these, if there are any non-technical questions, you can always contact Chatterjee, who is the institute head over here. Okay, so that's it, guys, which I have. In case if you happen to have any queries, you can always contact Chatterjee and he knows how to get me. Okay, so looking forward to meet up you guys on in the classroom or online very soon. Okay, and if there are any questions, like I said, you can always send a note to Chatterjee or call him. Yeah, all right. Thanks, guys.